and welcome back to another episode of Marketing Inc. I've got an incredible guest today, Miss Natasha Willis, the founder of School of Bots. Welcome to the show, Natasha.
Thank you so much for having me, Ali. I'm really excited for our convo and to dive into everything that's going on in this world.
Same here. So for the listeners who may not be familiar with you, why don't you give us a quick background on who you are, what you do, and kind of what brought you to this place in your business?
Yeah, absolutely. So in 2016, when messenger bots / chat automation kind of became a thing, I was like fresh in my first semester of college and trying to figure out what first business I wanted to create. It felt really aligned to like dive into this new space. I had no idea what I was doing. And so long story short, left college, my now husband quit his job and we started our first marketing agency / business together. First year was rough, but we ended it with 6 figures in revenue. We were like, oh my gosh, okay, this works somewhat. We just got to figure out how this goes and what we should do. So during that time, we traveled in 7 different countries. We were living in I think we ended the year at 24 different apartments or houses we had lived in. And one of the special things though, that was a big eye opener is a lot of people in the US, as well as everyone we talk to outside the US, always thinks that one country or another is behind in technology and behind in implementation. And that is true to an extent, especially in certain languages. But in terms of the countries overall, we found that everybody was at a very similar place when it came to chat automation and what people were doing with it. And we were able to acquire clients in all these different places we went to as well. And so now we've been able to kind of take all of that, kind of fast forward. We were able to at that point, send out over 20 million messages on the messaging platforms that we focus on, which is Messenger, Instagram, WhatsApp, and SMS. We've had some of the biggest information product companies like ClickFunnels, Russell Brunson, Jenna Kutcher, Amy Porterfield, these brands that we looked up to and learned from beforehand, but we're able to come in because very few people, even now, are still doing this at the level that we do it at. And so it's been a special experience the last couple of years to be able to learn how this all works. And ultimately for us, though, our goal and what we'll talk about is that these tools are really powerful for lead generation and revenue generation. And I think a lot of people get caught up in, well, this is just going to be automating FAQ, or this is one autoresponder. And that is how some people approach it because it's a blank slate, just like a website is. You can turn that website into a very complicated multi-page thing no one's going to read through, or you can turn it into a funnel, which I know your audience is probably familiar with and you are very familiar with. And so that's kind of the same approach that we take to this. And that's allowed us to generate over $30 million in revenue for our clients using these, what we call now AI chat funnels, because it really is more of a funnel experience rather than just a one autoresponder.
Yeah. I absolutely love that. I think that ultimately, a lot of people saw chatbots and things like this as something that was cool. Maybe they got into it initially. And then like so many marketers or business owners, they get the shiny object syndrome and they just hop on to the next thing. They think, oh, well, that was cool, but I'm going to move on. And you have really stayed focused on this core functionality that I think is only going to continue to increase in popularity. I mean, if you look at all the users, SMS alone, everybody falls into that category essentially. Mm-hmm. But just the popularity of social media messaging in general, it's hard not to see the potential. And I think you've been one of the few people who has really dialed that in and made it your core mission. And it's obviously paid off. As you said, you've worked with some of the biggest names in the information product space. So one thing that I really love is the SMS side. I have done things with the messenger automation. I actually had really great success with it, but I just, didn't necessarily keep focusing in that area specifically. I do a lot on SMS right now, but I'm very excited to hear more about what you are doing that's working, which platforms are working best, what strategies are working best, so we can talk really about any of those angles that you feel is most appropriate. But why don't you just kind of take a step back for the people who may not be super familiar with what this actually looks like and tell them what that experience would be if you were using messenger automation or chat automation for maybe the first time?
Sure. So there's a couple of ways that people can opt in, and I'd love to take people through that so that they can understand, oh, okay, this is the user journey of like where I would actually begin. In terms of the platforms for the podcast, we can probably just focus on Messenger and Instagram because Instagram has the biggest potential right now. Like this is, I mean, just insane the results that we're getting and the organic reach that you get and how much farther this takes your organic reach as well when you implement it. So Instagram, I think, should definitely be the focus for what we cover. But everything we'll talk about for Instagram is directly applicable to Messenger as well. And then even SMS and WhatsApp too. So in terms of the user journey, we over time, like when we implement, our full scope system, and I mean, obviously we've got SOPs and templates and all these things like super dialed in. So for anyone who's listening, like, please don't get overwhelmed around like what this looks like. This has taken many years to kind of create, but typically a full-fledged system will look like Messenger. We're able to use on Facebook organic, right? We'll talk about what that looks like in a little bit, as well as ads. And then on websites, which maybe you've done as well, you can have the chat widget from Messenger.
Yeah.
And the reason that we prefer that over most like live chat platforms that most companies tend to use on their sites is because once again, we can take people through an actual funnel in that conversation and capture people's emails, get them on what we call DM lists, just a way to broadcast out to them on Messenger, get their phone number, add them to your SMS list, help them get a freebie, answer their questions, right? So that's kind of one pillar of the traffic. And that's just one stream that will lead to whatever campaign you're kind of creating inside of the messages. Then for Instagram, this one's 8-step kind of thing. So I'll just take you through real quick, like all the ways that are possible, and then feel free to kind of shoot in any questions. Essentially, each interaction that somebody can make with you on Instagram can likely be a trigger. So when somebody comments on your Instagram live, you can say, hey, comment. Let's say that you've got an upcoming webinar coming up. And let's say that webinar is about local business marketing, right? So maybe you just say, hey, if you want to join my upcoming webinar, like towards the end of your Instagram live or what have you, then just comment local below and I'll pop into your DMs and help you get registered. So somebody comments on that live, they immediately get a message from you that says, hey, it's Allie, like, thanks for joining my live. Also, I'm so excited to have you join this upcoming masterclass. Like, click here to kind of get registered. They don't go to a landing page, but instead they continue the conversation with you and you say, are you ready to register now? I can help you do that. I just need your email. Or do you want to learn a little bit more about what we're going to cover? And so if they say yes, then awesome. You can capture their email directly in the messages, which I'm sure you've done as well, and then be able to send that over to your webinar platform and to your CRM. So that's a straight shooter, super easy. You've now captured them. And we can take webinar registrations from an average 25 to 30% is what we see most companies that we work with doing, up to a 70 to 95% because it's just such a seamless process to get people in. Right. So that's one path. And then the other path now becomes just like somebody's going through a landing page and kind of they're scrolling through to find the information they're looking for. It's a similar experience in chat where you're saying, okay, are you ready to register now? Or do you want to learn more about what we're going to cover? Okay, you got that. Well, do you want to learn more about the instructor, the host of the masterclass? Okay, are you ready to register? Do you want to learn a little bit more? So we're able to kind of feed that information to them and just meet people where they're at to help get as close to 100% of those people registered so far. Does that all make sense so far in regards to the DM piece?
Absolutely. And I think it's going to make a lot of sense to the people that are listening as well. So when I was primarily using it, mainly Facebook, Instagram, DMs hadn't really come out yet. I believe that is a fairly new piece of the puzzle, correct?
Yes. Yeah. As of June 2021. So we're just like a little bit over a year in.
So it sounds super similar to the way that we would use it on Facebook. So if you are a business owner who has already done some of this on Facebook, then you're really not having to reinvent the wheel for Instagram. This sounds like it's a new place to be able to take these strategies and really expand them to a totally different audience, a new audience, and hopefully take some of those things that are working on Facebook and also allow them to work on this channel as well. So I love the ease of the registration piece, whether that is for something like a webinar or a lead magnet. I mean, at the end of the day, some of these things are very simple. Like you said, people may not need a lot of additional information to decide if they want to move forward. Other people, however, they might, there's people that they need to read a paragraph and some people need to read a page. When someone wants to learn more, what is your approach to giving them that additional information? Do you have a strategy that's worked well in terms of, hey, if you want to learn more about when and where this is taking place, respond this way. If you want to learn more about the content, respond this way. Walk me through kind of those next steps if someone is not quite ready to register just yet.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we dive into that, Ali, I realize we kind of left an open loop with the rest of the ways that you can trigger the messages on Instagram. Do you want me to run through that just so that way people are like, what were the other seven? So I realized we might have skipped over it a little bit. Awesome. So just real quick, the commenting on a live, people can comment on a post or a reel to get that first message. They can direct message you. When they actually direct message you, there can be prompts that show up. So you could have like your most common questions there, or something like sign up for my free class. So whatever you want to put in there. Ads, which we briefly talked about. So feed and story ads as well. Then we've got story mentions. So this is unique to Instagram and not so much on Facebook, where anytime someone tags you in an Instagram story, that can trigger the first message. And then I mentioned comments on posts and reels. And then the other last piece would be replying to stories. So that's great for like having stories up as well as story highlights. So those will kind of be the 8 ways that everybody can jump into the whole thing.
Of those different formats, do you find that one works better overall, or does it depend on somebody's behavior on the platform?
Typically, it's going to be stories that get the most opt-ins by far. And in 2021, Instagram shared that before automation had publicly launched, and I believe the numbers are still the same now, 50% of the conversations on Instagram from people to businesses start from stories. And it makes sense because there's that urgency piece, right? So if a story goes up or there's an offer or something, there's only 24 hours until it's up. And so you kind of want to reach out to that business about what they talked about in the story. And further, sending a message is the main call to action on a story on Instagram at the bottom. So it makes a lot of sense that that's where most opt-ins originate from. But it's good to have both post reels and then also stories, because the posts and the reels are obviously going to reach a newer audience, whereas the stories are just going to reach your current audience and people for the most part. But nonetheless, stories tend to get a lot more opt-ins. So it's just good to have kind of like a circulating every few days or even every day, some kind of way for people to dive into one of your funnels.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's, cold audience versus warm audience, or colder versus warmer. You're always typically going to see those better results, those higher percentages on your warm audience. Your story audience is probably going to be your warmest. What have you seen in terms of people using this with ads? So I would assume it's probably pretty similar to like the JSON ads that we used on Facebook, connecting somebody to that send message button instead of a landing page and then getting the opt-in that way. Has that been successful on Instagram as well?
Yes, it is successful on Instagram, and it's a little bit of a different opt-in process. So technically there's 2 ways somebody could opt in. Either there can be the send message button, that's a CTA on the ad. Somebody clicks into that, but there is a window that pops up on Instagram and it kind of fills it with a little bit of a headline and then a pre-prompt. So even though it's maybe a little bit hard for people to visualize if they've never seen it before, essentially you can use that space to then have people message you a specific word. So that's one opt-in. But the other would be that you can run ads and then connect the comment tool to it so that anybody who comments on the ad, you can also send a message to. So those are kind of the 2 ad opt-in methods. And in terms of it working well, yes, typically we can drop lead costs by up to 50% by implementing that on a funnel, like within a 30-day, 45-day period, depending on the offer, et cetera, sales cycle. But yeah, we've seen them do really, really well. And testing on organic first, even if you only have 1,000, 10,000, whatever followers, is still a great way to get a little bit of data in. And then you can just run paid traffic to pretty much that same funnel, just changing a little bit of the messaging, obviously for a cold audience, and works like magic right now.
Have you seen that the comment versus the, click to send message, that one of those has worked better in terms of the paid ads? I feel like the comment on the ads, like if it were me, I would probably feel like that is getting better results on the paid side. What do you typically see between the two, or is it just a toss up depending on the client?
Yeah, so the comment feature literally just came out the last like 2-3 weeks. So I don't have enough data to say, okay, for sure it's outperforming right now. To be honest, the results are somewhat similar. I feel like there's this kind of social behavior where like people are willing to comment when it's more organic, but for some reason I almost feel like there's a little bit of a blocker with paid. It's like, oh, I don't know this company or who's
Yeah.
going to see this, or maybe there's a little
Yeah.
bit of that psychology at play. Not for sure, but just my current guess. So I'll have more data on that in the coming weeks. But as of right now, I would test it, both of those, for any campaign you're going to run, just to see what ends up converting the best.
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting point, and it would probably depend a lot on what you do, what you sell. You know, there might be some things that people don't want to publicly broadcast that they're interested in. So that definitely does make a lot of sense. So tell me about some of the additional ways that you are implementing this for yourself and for your clients. So we talked about like the gated content offer, the webinar, or the lead magnet. What are some of the other use cases for these automations? We can talk about some simple ones, but also maybe some, more complex ones for those people that are maybe a little bit more familiar with this.
Yeah, absolutely. Two of like many, because ultimately you can do whatever you want inside of the chat, but actually maybe three use cases that I think will be relevant to your audience. First would be appointment setting. So actually being able to automate up to as close to 100% as you want to, right? Just continuing to optimize qualification and essentially eliminating the need for an initial call with prospects if you can get all that information simply by asking those questions in chat, right? And the great thing is that you can have audio notes and selfie videos, or just videos in general, images, all these things send through inside of Instagram as well as Messenger. And so that allows you as well to kind of get those points across like you might on a call. So that would be one we can dive into. DM lists / broadcasting would be another one that we can dive into, because that's been huge. And just recently, it's not public yet, it's in beta right now, but we're beta testing on a lot of accounts, and that's been going really well. And then the third would be like purchase campaigns. So actually selling something inside of the DM so that the end point is that checkout page, rather than sending people to a gated content freebie like you talked about, webinar, lead magnet, etc., and letting that do the selling, but instead having that selling experience happen all inside of the DMs.
So are you saying that the actual payment side of things can happen in the DMs, or is it really just more about the sales conversation and then linking to a checkout page? I mean, can people actually pay through DMs at this point?
They can pay through DMs, but it has to be physical products. So if you're doing digital products, then you'd want to send to a checkout page. And right now, because it's not a like beautifully just yet integrated system, right now we send everybody to checkout pages just because it allows us to track everything better and ultimately get better results, because we're not really able to track the DM sales as efficiently. So Instagram is kind of working on that with Instagram Shop, and like their whole payments platform is like a big priority for them, but it's not quite there yet. So checkout pages are definitely the move right now.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think in all honesty, my audience as a whole would probably really love to talk about the call scheduling side of it, the pre-qualification side of it. So tell me about some of the different ways that you've utilized this, what some of the benefits are versus sending somebody to, a survey, which I encourage people to do, but not everybody does that to pre-qualify in general. So is this kind of more like a conversational qualification survey that's happening through Messenger?
Exactly. And to take it a step further, because we're able to like kind of pop in our own content in between each question, it can feel just like if an appointment setter called them on the phone, or they were jumping on that 15-minute, 20-minute, whatever qualification call. So in terms of how we typically approach it, it's going to be, first we'll look at, the framework of your current application and what are the questions that you're asking there. But then furthermore, what actually happens on the appointment setting calls, and taking that language that's resonating with them, as well as language, if we can, from transcripts of the calls that you've already had, like what are prospects actually directly saying, and then being able to craft a ideally 5 to 10 question process inside of the DMs, but not just like hammering question after question, but actually in between each question, being able to pop in a testimonial or social proof. Like, for example, let's say that you've got a coaching program, it's for people who are making at least 10K a month. And so if somebody comes through that qualification from an ad, then you could say, hey, so let me know like where are you at right now in terms of income, just so I can figure out, what resource I should send you or how we can best support you. And they say, yep, I'm over 10K a month. So then we can say, amazing. Well, here's these two people, for example, or one really strong testimonial of somebody that did something like very casually, right? Just dropped in, not like a whole, watch this 5-minute video. And so that way it feels casual in there. And now, okay, moving into the next question, right? So kind of being able to drop those types of things in so that by the end of that process, it's essentially accomplishing the same thing as if they had watched a VSL, jumped on an appointment setting call, and filled out your application. And now you can even determine, like, should they even get on a call with your closers, or would that be a waste of your team's time? And instead we can downsell, let's say, another product that you guys have, like $1,000 self-study course that maybe you can sell to the people who aren't going to qualify for, let's say, a high ticket coaching offer.
Yeah, no, I really love this, in all honesty. So a lot of what we currently do right now, like I mentioned, is through conditional logic surveys and things like that. We, offer the downsells if they do not qualify in certain ways. We ask those follow-up questions. So I think this is something that would fit very well into my current process. And I think for a lot of people out there, this doesn't have to be focused again on information products. If you're a physical business, I would say at least 70% of the physical businesses that I work with, they have qualification criteria that needs to be met. And whether it is getting on that phone call or having someone schedule an appointment in your office or scheduling an in-home consultation or estimate, that's your time or the time of your team. And time is valuable. And it's also not super easy these days to find really great people to support you in your business always. So finding a real appointment setter to get on the phone that you have to train, number one. So you have to be very knowledgeable at, like, how should these calls actually go? Then you're having to monitor this person at least in some way to make sure things are being done. You have to communicate with them, check in with them. So that's a lot of time. That's money. That's effort and energy that's going into this process that ultimately can be automated. And I know that it feels overwhelming for a lot of people, or maybe they feel like, is this going to lose the personal element that I want to bring to my business? What have you found in terms of those connections? Do you still feel like people feel the quality of the connection? Is it super obvious that this is automated? Are you supposed to make sure they know it is automated? Tell me a little bit about how those conversations flow in an AI format versus if it was a real person communicating with them.
Yeah, I love that you brought all this up, first of all, because the biggest doubt that I see from small business owners or entrepreneurs who maybe are just starting out or haven't used a lot of automation is this going to essentially create a bad reputation or negatively affect our relationships with our clients? And all the things that you just mentioned, right? Putting time, energy, love, support, etc., into an appointment setter, or even just into like your support team. And at the end of the day, all humans are going to have a bad day at some point. They're going to get sick. You don't have a team. Most people don't, who is on 24/7 that can support people. And so this completely eliminates all of those unfortunate pieces of what kind of happens as you start to build a sales organization and a true business. And you're able to have that quality control of someone's going to get this positive and, essentially like qualified experience that I have decided I want to say, instead of like having to rely on somebody to do that for you. So yeah, that's definitely a big piece of it. Like when it comes to the mindset, is just kind of shifting that. And then in terms of people actually being responsive to it. So let's kind of separate into two buckets, because if you are, let's say, a personality brand like yourself, and let's say that people were jumping on from an ad into, let's say, the Instagram that's represented by your face and your name, then we will usually use that person's likeness inside of the conversation. So the person who's chatting with you, they feel like, hey, this is Allie's personality, but obviously it is automation. We don't have to say so explicitly, hey, this is a chatbot and this is all automated, kind of taking a little bit of a colder corporate approach, but we can just say like, hey, I'm going to take you through this process, and you don't need to make that such a like big factor of it. We don't see any negative feedback from that so far. And I mean, at this point, we've got so many millions of messages of data to know that people resonate with it, because they're just excited to be talking with your likeness, because they're getting images and videos and audios from you, and they're all getting to go through that experience all at the same time, which would be impossible for you to do manually. And if you did do it manually, usually it's rushed and it's not a good experience. And then you've got all the other factors I talked about. Somebody's having a bad day, they're representing you in chat, now you look like an asshole, etc. So there's that side of things for the personality brands, and that's all been positive. For companies, if let's say that you've got, one of our clients' founder, for example, they don't have like a face of the company, they've got a founder, CEO person who's like, hey, I do interviews, I will host webinars as me, but the company is the company, the logo. And so when we're on Instagram or Messenger or any of these platforms, typically what we'll do is either in like a generic kind of message, let's say it's more FAQ, we'll always speak as like the we/us, like, we're so excited you're here, we're here to help you, etc. Let us know if we can answer anything else for you. That kind of voice, that does great. The other side of it is a big question that we get a lot, especially from smaller businesses, where they're like, should I create a mascot or a personality or a persona for the company? And to be honest, I feel like it's not quite there yet to where like that resonates a lot of the times. I've been seeing some people do this with Instagram where they're like, I'm insert random weird, like robot name, like the bot, I'm here to kind of help you. It just does not resonate. So it's much better for companies to, even if it's not actually the person or even somebody real on your team. I've seen companies do this as well, and it works for them. It's like, hey, this is Samantha from X company. Like, thanks for chatting in. Let me kind of take you through this process to see how we can serve you. So that's how we position it, and that's what we found to work the best.
Awesome. So in terms of the way that those questions are structured, do you have to prompt people in the way that you want them to respond? So for example, doing a conditional logic survey, the easiest way for me to get the info I need is to pre-program exactly what answers they're able to select. And then I can decide if they answer this way, this is where they go. They answer that way, this is where they go. So is that a similar format in these messenger conversations? And if so, what are the different ways that that can be done or utilized?
Yes. So for the most part, especially for actually doing conditional logic, like you just described in chat as well, then you do want to have multiple choice options. So that'll pop up as different button options that people can select. And they can, with Messenger, it's about 11 options max. And with Instagram, I believe it's about the same. I don't think we've actually hit that because usually we keep it to like 2 to 5 max. And usually you can if you simplify it. If you think you can't simplify it more, like you can if you give it a little more thought. And so that's
a lot of options.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So that's what we'll do for almost everything. Now, when it comes to, let's say if we ask somebody, hey, more of like a whimsical question, if you will, that's meant to more so just kind of get them thinking about something and be like, so like paint the perfect day for me. For example, let's say this is a life coaching, questionnaire. Then we might say like, paint your perfect day for me. Like what would happen kind of from beginning to end? Somebody types a long ass thing in there, right? And now we're able to like pop that in as just something the sales team can leverage, but we might not ever like use that in the messages. Then you've got, those prompted essentially responses. So we can use that in messages like, awesome, you're a coach. Well, we've helped over 2,000 coaches implement our system, for example. So that can kind of get weaved in. And I'm sure you guys probably do that as well already. And then the third type of question that's more open input as well, that'll be usually the only other one we'll do like open, would be if we're saying, hey, so look, like we only want to work with people who are serious. So are you willing to like invest into this? And kind of letting them like say that in their own words, or saying like how ready they are for something, to just make sure that that kind of urgency is there to know if we want to shoot them to the sales team or do a little bit of nurturing before we do that temp check again.
So tell me how these conversations, particularly the more appointment setting, pre-qualification conversations, where does that end? So is that something where you're collecting all of the data, you're sending that to the sales team's deciding if they want to reach out to that person about that next step? Or are you actually deciding through Messenger who is a good fit and who's not based on how they're answering, and then presenting them with that easy next step? Maybe it's the link to the downsell, or maybe it's the link to the calendar. How does that actually conclude?
Yeah, so it'll depend on the client sales process, like above all, but most of the time, 99% of the time, we, especially as we scale, obviously, and there's a ton of front end volume, it's just not really viable and not a good use of resources to have the client's team or like a sales team have to sift through all of that. I know that most sales teams do it that way, but if you don't have to, then why do it? So usually we'll have the automation actually filter through like who's going to be a good fit, who's not. The only caveat to this slash like something to kind of watch out for is a lot of people lie about where they're at when it comes to revenue numbers on qualification. I'm sure you guys have seen that as well. So even though somebody is presented with the, hey, based on where you're at, like we can't serve you with the offer maybe you heard about in the VSL, for example, like let's say they already knew what it was going to be. But I would recommend that you kind of run through this downsell, for example, this course. So how does that sound to you? Right. And if they're like, no, plus like those actually weren't my real numbers, I didn't realize you guys are going to qualify me on that, even though we'll say that at that point too, we're like, please be honest, because this will be used to determine if we can help you or not. At the end, if they say that, there's always a way to reroute them so that we can check, okay, well, sounds like maybe you didn't share your actual numbers with us. Like, what are they? And all that happens automated. And then we can route them back. So that's the only exception to people who fall into that bucket of like unqualified, where they're actually, oh, just kidding, I am qualified. But oftentimes, like, there's really not too much error that we run into with this, just because we're able to kind of pivot at each step if needed to route people to the right place.
So how exactly does the AI determine where somebody goes? Are you just pre-programming this in to the chatbot? And is that based on the language that somebody is using? So I think it's, it's simpler for me to understand with those pre-programmed multiple choice type of options. But when it comes to more of the open-ended questions, is that something you're able to do? Is that based on intent, positive or negative intent? How does that actually work?
Yeah, with Instagram, because the AI is not as deep as like, let's say what you can do with Messenger when it comes to plugging in, for example, Google's AI dialogue flow, we typically will not use, and actually I shouldn't say typically, we never right now will use that on Instagram to determine where somebody should funnel to. So all the conditional logic will be based on the multiple choice options that we present. And then that could be a combination of them. That could be like one core one that we're looking at. But yeah, that'll be kind of as far as it goes there. With Messenger, we can go deeper, but to be honest, it tends to complicate things just because, again, AI is taking over the world, but it's also still kind of in its infancy when it comes to some of these use cases. So because it's not 100% there, we'll usually just use multiple choice to know, okay, this person said that they're at this revenue amount, that they're this kind of business, and that they're this, like route them over here. But like I mentioned, there's always a way for the user to kind of self-correct their path depending on what we present to them at the end.
That's awesome. So, taking it from a concept to a reality for some people that are listening, that's going to be their challenge. So when it comes to what are the technical tools that you would need to create something like this, how long on average should someone expect this to take them to implement? What are the options to hire someone to implement this for you? Let's talk about the actual real world application. If somebody's listening, they're like, this sounds amazing. Know that I need this. How do I do this? What would you recommend for someone?
Yeah. So the first place to get started, and it also depends on like who you are. Let's say that you right now don't have an offer that you are consistently selling. You're still testing out a few things. You're still figuring out your traffic piece as well. So for those people, you could start with something really simple. If you hop into manychat.com, MANYCHAT, that's the best tool that you can use for this, in my opinion. We've tested hundreds of tools, and I know that you use them as well in the past. And it's what we use for all of our clients still today. It's the best tool that gives you like the analytics that you really need, which is going to help you determine, is this working? So that would be the first step, is jump in there, create an account, and then set up a really simple automation to send people initially through. Maybe it's just set up a story trigger, which you'll see how to do in there. They make it pretty straightforward. So it could be, hey, message me whatever word maybe aligns with your offer or what you do. And then from there, in that story saying, hey, message me this word, we'll find out, if we can serve you, if it's a good fit. We just had a few client spots open up, whatever offer you have. If you're a local business, maybe it's some kind of offer that you're running that week. And then once they get into the DMs, it could be a very simple, hey, what's your email? Okay, awesome. Now let me pop you over to this qualification form. And you can just send them to the link of the qualification form. So then that way, at least you have their email. You've got them obviously in the DMs, which is why this is so powerful also. It's a guaranteed communication channel. And that makes a huge difference compared to just sending them to a landing page and you lose the majority of people. And then from there, you can continue to iterate until you get to the point of like what we've talked about, which is being able to have that entire qualification process, not only like the questions inside of the DMs, but also having information in between each one that's kind of warming people up to the offer, and then having that conditional logic to know like where you want to route people based on their responses. That'd be kind of that first bucket. And then if you do have a converting offer, you've got consistent traffic, you know that each week you expect around, let's say 100 applications to your offer. And you guys know that your conversion rate's 10%. And so you're going to be converting X amount of people, then building it out a little bit more at that point, because you have good data and you can test against your baseline right now, makes a lot of sense. And it can be something more simple, like you just literally take your application and plop it into the DMs, add some follow-up at each point, and launch that, see how it goes with ads and organic. And then from there, like I said, continuing to iterate, because it does take, obviously for us, because we've been doing it for so long, I can pop in and build something insane in like a couple of hours. But if somebody's just starting with this, you just don't have that muscle yet. And so that could take months to iterate. So, it's all I've been doing, living and breathing for the last several years. So of course, there's a huge gap in that skill set. But at the same time, I really think it's possible for anybody to do this. Just comes down to like what you want to be spending your time as a business owner doing also, because this can get real nitty gritty and, complex and everything fast. So I would recommend like getting educated, going through courses, or like going through resources to maybe get a template or something that'll help you in that process, so that you're not having to like from scratch think about how the hell should I put this all together.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the thing is, I find it extremely fun. When I first started getting into this, I thought it was the coolest thing ever. I mean, I built some of my first chatbots, where I just did it for 2 weeks straight, built out. I mean, it was probably like 2017, 2018, I guess, when it was pretty new and just so totally different than anything that had really existed before. And I think for anybody who's automations minded, which I know is not everyone by far, if you have not tried to build something like this yet, you will probably really enjoy it. Does that mean you should do it yourself? Maybe not. I mean, could I do this if I needed to? Absolutely. But do I want to? Just given the other things that I have going on, it probably would be a good idea to reach out to somebody who's very familiar with this and can knock it out for you really, really quickly, and just be able to do it to a higher level with less trial and error. So you don't even have to worry about doing all of the tests yourself. I think there's a lot to be said just in terms of saving time and not having to try and reinvent the wheel. But I do think that this is where people are going, where these platforms are going. There is still, like you mentioned, a lot of growth for these AI conversational channels to improve over time. But even with where they are right now, they can be so incredibly powerful. And I do just want to emphasize, because so many people struggle to find the employee piece, this can be a good solution for some of that follow-up. And I know firsthand that follow-up is severely lacking for most small businesses in their lead generation. It's one of the biggest issues that they have. And it's in large part because of time, but also because they don't really understand what a follow-up strategy should look like. So this is something that you could implement one time, make sure it's done the right way, and then have that confidence that it is being done the same way every single time without you having to micromanage the process. So I think this is super cool. Natasha, you have done a great job of making it easy for people to understand, making them, understand where to go to get started if they have not yet dove into this type of thing. If you could leave the audience with one additional piece of advice or recommendation when it comes to utilizing this technology in their marketing, what would you tell them?
Yeah. And it might seem obvious, but leading with value and really treating it like a casual conversation is key. Like if you wouldn't because when you're building it, I think a lot of people forget that it's a conversation and they go into like email creation, landing page creation, like just this kind of mode where you're popping in all of these emojis and like different things that at the end of the day, you wouldn't send a friend if you were texting them that way. And I know everybody texts a little bit differently, including the different generations of ages. You have people that use the ellipses on everything, right? You've got people who use a bunch of exclamation points. If you don't use an exclamation point, some people get offended. So there's all of this kind of interesting behavior around messaging. But the core parts are there, that the shorter, the better, and that the more casual and conversational it feels, the better as well. So just don't overdo it on emojis or punctuation or lengthy sentences, and you will be golden, because copy is the most important aspect of this and you only have so much room. So it really is key to like less is better in those scenarios. And then from there, add more copy after you have that like MVP version that you've written.
Awesome. So if people want to learn more about how they can work with you, where would you send them?
Yeah, so feel free to go to our site. It's schoolofbots.co. And we've got case studies and free videos that you can watch on there, as well as an application to work with us and how we work. So I think even just by like reading through our site, people can see some of the visuals of the things that we talked about. Because I know a lot of what we covered are like, so imagine, that this kind of happening. So if they jump on our site, they can see, examples of what do ads look like, what do posts and things that actually get these comment triggers look like. So I think that'll be helpful, and feel free to reach out there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This has been amazing. I hope you guys will take some of what she shared today and actually implement it in your business and see the result firsthand. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this, and I will see you on the next episode.